Beyond the bodybuilder myth, 5 surprising lessons from the Stripling warriors if you walk through a Latter-day Saint meeting house or open a gospel art book. The Stripling warriors are almost always depicted the same way, as bronze, hulking figures with the physiques of modern bodybuilders. This popular artistic tradition, immortalized by painters like Arnold Freiberg, suggests that their miraculous victory was a result of strapping physical prowess. However, the linguistic reality of the word stripling suggests a very different image. We often search for miracles in obvious displays of strength, but the Book of Mormon narrative suggests something far more nuanced and accessible. The account of Helaman's little sons is not a story of physical giants. It is a narrative of spiritual giants hidden inside lanky, adolescent frames. By looking past the artistic six-packs, we find 5 counterintuitive takeaways that reveal the true nature of faith under fire. 1. They were probably bean poles, not bodybuilders. The term stripling carries a specific meaning that is often lost in modern translation. According to Noah Webster's 1828 American Dictionary of the English Language, a stripling is a tall, slender youth, or a lad who is just passing from boyhood to manhood. The word is rooted in the idea of a strip, something thin and narrow, suggesting a youth who has shot up suddenly during a growth spurt. In the reality of the text, these young men were likely the bean poles of their village, awkward, raw-boned, and even gaunt adolescents. Internal evidence suggests they were younger than typical military age. Helaman affectionately called them his little sons, Alma 56:39, and scholars estimate they were aged 12 to 16. This shift in perspective matters. The miracle wasn't their physical power, but their spiritual maturity during a growth spurt. They weren't seasoned soldiers, they were completely green and completely outmatched, proving that God uses the weak things of the earth to achieve the impossible. 2. The shadow of the miracle. Being happy for someone else, we often celebrate the 260 survivors, but we frequently overlook the sobering detail in Alma 57:26, that while Helaman's sons were preserved, 1,000 other Nephites died in that same battle. This creates a shadow to the miracle. For every mother of a stripling son who felt elation, there were families of those 1,000 who received the news they most dreaded. Helaman himself felt the weight of this emotional tightrope. As he rushed to take stock of his forces, he moved with breathless anticipation. When he realized all his little sons had survived, he was overcome with relief and elation. We can almost see the spontaneous embrace or hear the bubbling laughter as he confirmed the news. Yet, the narrative forces us to ask, how do we react when someone else receives the miracle we prayed for but didn't receive? This account suggests that a high form of discipleship is having outcome-independent faith, a trust that God is still a God of miracles even when the miracle isn't ours. As a relative of Elder Dallin H. Oaks once stated, our family's faith is in Jesus Christ and is not dependent on outcomes. 3. The mother's testimony was forged in trauma, not comfort. The phrase, "our mothers knew," it is often treated as a sweet domestic sentiment. However, a study of the timeline reveals that these mothers were not teaching from a place of comfort, but from a background of profound trauma. These women were pregnant or raising toddlers during the massacres of the Anti-Nephi Lehi people and their subsequent grueling exodus. They had seen their own families perishing under the sword while refusing to fight back, witnessing their loved ones praising God even in the very act of perishing. Alma 24:23. When they taught their sons that God would deliver them, it wasn't a naive platitude. It was a hard-won conviction forged in the fire of refugee camps and battlefield losses. They didn't just believe in deliverance, they had survived the lack of it and still chose to trust. 4. Exactness is the antidote to the cafeteria approach. While cultural tradition insists on calling them warriors, the scriptural text never actually uses that word. Instead, it calls them stripling soldiers or sons, who were defined by a unique quality. They performed every word of command with exactness. Alma 57:21. In our modern world, we are often tempted by what President Russell M. Nelson calls a cafeteria approach to obedience, picking and choosing which commands to follow based on convenience. President Nelson warned that this practice will not work and will lead to misery. The stripling sons understood the difference between selective compliance and true alignment. Standard obedience, following the commands that make sense, are socially acceptable, or are convenient to our current lifestyle. Stripling exactness, a firm and undaunted commitment to the whole word of command, trusting the commander even when the command is difficult. 5. Deliverance is about liberty, not just survival. We often assume that deliverance always means staying alive. However, the sons of Helaman had a much broader corporate view of God's promises. The record states that they did think more upon the liberty of their fathers than they did upon their lives. Alma 56:47. To these young men, deliverance meant the preservation of their people's religious freedom and their hope and views of Christ. They were prepared for the laying down of their lives to ensure that the liberty wherewith God has made them free was protected. While God did miraculously preserve each of them individually, their faith was not a guarantee of survival. It was a commitment to a cause larger than themselves. They trusted that God would deliver the people and the purpose, regardless of what happened to the individual. Conclusion: the miracle of the next step, the story of Helaman's sons, is not a call to become more physically strapping or to expect a life free from wounds. In fact, every single one of those young men received many wounds in battle, Alma 57:25. Instead, it is a call to develop the lanky faith of those who are completely green and outmatched, but spiritually fixed with determination. We don't need a bodybuilder's strength to fight today's spiritual battles. We need the resilience of those who trust the shepherd more than the specific outcome of the day. As we face our own superior obstacles, we must look to the example of those raw-boned boys who stood their ground. Are we willing to trust God's power to deliver us, even when the deliverance looks different than the miracle we originally prayed for?